Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 1, Virginia Morris. This evening, we commemorate the 95th anniversary of the Meningate Memorial to the Missing. 95 years ago today, the Meningate was unveiled. Initial reaction to the first memorial to the missing to be established by the Imperial War Graves Commission was wide-ranging. Austrian writer Stefan Zweig described it as more impressive than any triumphal arch or monument to victory that I have ever seen. Siegfried Sassoon's poem on passing the New Meningate condemned it as a sepulchre of crime. Others praised its simplicity. Sir Reginald Bloomfield, who designed the arch, said it was a work by which he wished to be remembered. In medieval times, the original narrow gateway on the eastern side of the city of Ypres had been called the Huggenpoort, port being the Flemish word for gate. By the outbreak of the First World War, the gateway was known as the Menenpoort, Menengate because the road running through it led to the nearby town of Menin. During the First World War, British and Dominion soldiers passed through the Menenpoort on their way to the front lines. While Menengate was the closest town gate to the fighting, the location was extremely dangerous due to German shell fire, and most troops leaving for the front lines used other gates. 5 major battles occurred around Ypres during the First World War, including the battle today, commonly known as Passchendaele. Although the memorial bears the names of almost 55,000 soldiers, including 6,000 Australians, so great were the casualties that not all of the names of the missing could be included. Over 300,000 British and Dominion soldiers were killed in Ypres, more than 90,000 of whom have no known grave. Some 35,000 British and New Zealand soldiers whose remains were never recovered from the fighting in the area are commemorated on the Tyne-Cot Memorial near Passchendaele. Latin inscriptions on either side of the Menengate's archway translate in English to read, "For country and for king." And there is an inscription inside the archway composed by Rudyard Kipling, which reads, "Ad marginem Dei gloriam," to the greater glory of God. Here are recorded names of officers and men who fell in Ypres, but to whom the fortune of war denied the known and honoured burial given to their comrades in death. In 1936, the 2 large stone guardian lions that originally stood on plinths on either side of the Menenpoort were donated to the Australian War Memorial by the Mayor of Ypres as a gesture of friendship. They had been damaged by German shell fire, which reduced much of the city to rubble during the war. Restoration work was completed in 1987, and the lions were placed inside the front entrance to the Australian War Memorial in 1991. In 2014, the Menengate lions went on loan to the Canadian War Museum in Ottawa, and more recently, the lions travelled to their original home of Ypres as part of the commemorations of the First World War. Every evening, the last post is sounded under the great arch of the Menengate. The last post ceremony conducted here at the Australian War Memorial was inspired by this moving tribute. Today, we commemorate the Menengate Memorial to the Missing and remember those Australians whose names are engraved upon its walls. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. This evening, we are honoured to welcome General Yamazaki, Chief of Staff, Joint Staff, Japan Self-Defence Forces, and the accompanying delegation, and Mr. John King, President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, ACT branch. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We also acknowledge the members of the RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching this ceremony broadcast across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem, which will be led this evening by members of the California State University Fullerton Choir. Thank you. If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Alban Armitage. Alban Armitage was born in 1881 in Sheffield, England, the youngest of 8 children, born to stonemason George Armitage and his wife Mary. Alban received his education at the local public school before going on to learn his father's trade. In 1899, Alban's father passed away, prompting him to move to Australia with his mother the following year. He arrived in Sydney at the end of March 1900 and settled in the inner suburbs, where he joined the St George English Rifle Regiment. 5 years later, he married Pearl Fuge in a small ceremony held at St Stephen's Anglican Church in Newtown. Alban and Pearl moved to her hometown of Muswellbrook, where Alban joined the local rifle club and later gained employment as a sanitary inspector. Alban Armitage enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 7th of August 1916. He was assigned to reinforcements of the 11th Machine Gun Company and began a short period of training in Australia. Before leaving, he and his comrades were farewelled at a small gathering held in the Casino Town Hall, where they were presented with small gifts from the community. Private Armitage embarked for active service from Melbourne on the 14th of March 1917, sailing on board the trip Austerley. He arrived back in England in early April and continued his training at the Machine Gun Training Depot in Grantham. After several weeks there, he embarked for the Western Front, joining his new comrades in the front lines on the 17th of June 1917. His arrival on the front came in the wake of an Allied attack on Mezzine Ridge, which marked the beginning of a 4-month offensive in the Ypres sector in Belgium. During the first weeks of active service, Private Armitage spent time alternating between training and rest behind the lines, as well as cleaning and prepping ammunition stores in the anticipation of upcoming attacks. Armitage's first major action with the battalion took place near Warnerton, a village southeast of Mezzine, in late July 1917. Units of the 11th Division were tasked with destroying German defensive positions and providing a diversion for offensives taking place further north. The battalions encountered fierce resistance and suffered from shelling and machine gun fire, but were successful in reaching their objectives. By the end of the operation, however, the division has sustained hundreds of casualties. Among the dead was Private Alban Armitage, who was hit by enemy shell in the second line of trenches and killed instantly. He was buried just over the parapet by his comrades, but his final resting place was unable to be located at the end of the war. Today, he is commemorated on the Meningate Memorial to the missing in Ypres. Private Alban Armitage was 36 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is one of but many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Alban Armitage, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We'll remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub of Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorials Development Project. And we wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.